On Long Island, there's a little suburb called Levittown. Constructed between 1947 and 1951, it was the first in a series of Levittowns. Designed to be mass-produced, they were made fast and cost-effective, and this set the standard for post-war suburbs all around the country. But within a 20-mile radius, within the borough of Queens, are earlier planned communities. Each of them had their own hope to be the model of future development, making this place a battleground for what the rest of the country could look like. In 1898, this line was drawn, creating the boundary we know for New York and each of its boroughs. With one exception.
In 1898, when they drew the line for the boundaries of Queens Borough, that boundary only included about 1/3 of Queens County.
This is Michael Michonne in an interview I did with him for the Brooklyn video.
And when it was realized that this is unbelievably unworkable, you've got a county that's 1/3 inside a city, they decided to create Nassau County. When they created Nassau County, they also decided to redraw the Queens Borough line. If you look at a map, a consolidation map from 1898, and look at the Queens Borough line, it is a straight line that encompasses all of Jamaica Bay and a little bit of the land to the east of Jamaica Bay, right? If you look at a map from 1899, 1 year later, the line is different. The line gives Nassau County a little bite out of Jamaica Bay, and then it goes back down. And that 12 square miles is the difference between the original Greater New York map and the current Greater New York map.
Despite losing those 12 square miles, Queens is the largest borough by a pretty large margin, and it still takes up over 100 square miles of land. To understand Queens, I think it's important to know what it was like during consolidation. Because unlike Staten Island, whose isolation slowed its development, Queens was surrounded by Brooklyn and Manhattan and the Bronx. Both its late development and its proximity to the other boroughs made it the battleground for competing visions of the 20th century. I'm heading to Flushing to meet someone who I found to talk to who is perfect for this video. Also, check this out. I wore the perfect appropriate attire. Okay, I'm already running a little late, so let's go. Just missed it. I missed it again. How you doing?
How are you, my friend?
It's good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I'm excited about this.
Yes, excellent. Awesome. Very appropriate. So my name is Jason Antos. I'm the Executive Director at the Queens Historical Society in downtown Flushing, and I have been chronicling, writing about, and preserving Queens history for 25 years. People from the Bronx and people from Brooklyn, they say where they're from first, and then they tell you what neighborhood they're from. Queens is different. Queens, we tell you the neighborhood we're from, and if you don't know where that is, we'll tell you, well, it's Queens.
This makes sense when you consider that during consolidation, there was no center of gravity in Queens. It was just a patchwork of disparate towns and villages.
Whereas Brooklyn had the advantage of already being consolidated itself, Queens, on the other hand, was brought into the consolidation as a patchwork of towns.
Some of them were colonial neighborhoods, some of them were newly developed neighborhoods. So the people living there, they were there from like the beginning. So, and this was like their identity. I'm from Woodside, I'm from Flushing, I'm from Corona.
When the Dutch arrived in the 1600s, Long Island was home to several different native Algonquin-speaking groups.
They refer to this area as Matinecock. Matinecock is Lenni Lenape language from the Algonquin peoples. It means place of the rolling hills. And that's because we're on the north shore of Queens, which is part of the north shore of Long Island. The north shore is hilly and rocky. The southern area is low, at or below sea level, and swampy.
Across this area, 5 main settlements were created that are still etched into the map.
This area was controlled by the Dutch at that time. However, many English people settled in the Dutch territory.
These early settlements were Newtown, Maspeth, Jamaica, and Flushing.
Out here, it was a small amount of Dutch, but a lot of British. The word Flushing is a Dutch word, however. It comes from the word Vlissingen, and there is a Vlissingen in Holland. It's a major port city. When the British took over, they couldn't pronounce it, so they pronounced it as Flushing, and that's where the word Flushing comes from. So it's a British corruption of a Dutch word.
With the exception of Long Island City, this whole area remained mostly farms and rural towns all the way up to consolidation.
Pictures of Queens at the turn of the century. Literally, potato fields, horse carts, hand-pumped wells, farmland. The place was empty.
This whole area was rural up until the middle of the 19th century, and now it's part of a bustling metropolis.
This is Charlotte Jackson. She works as the archivist at the Bound House in Flushing, which is one of the earliest Dutch houses in all of Queens.
It's either the second or third oldest house in New York City. The same family lived in the house for 7 generations, nearly 300 years. The Bounds acquired somewhere between 250 and 500 acres of farmland when the Bound estate was at its peak. So this garden that we're standing in is like the last remnant of that family farm.
Even though the borough was largely undeveloped by the time of consolidation, there were a couple key pieces of development that did happen before then that would really go on to shape the modern map.
The Long Island Railroad was constructed. I think they began work around 1834. After that, then, there was more development and, fewer people were pursuing an agrarian way of life. So in 1854, they started parceling up the old estate and selling it off for development.
Initially created just as a route to get to Boston, the Long Island Railroad was a lonely piece of infrastructure out in the fields. These tracks would prove to be the path of development not just in Queens, but across all of Long Island. And the other piece of development was very surprising to me. In 1838, the Greenwood Cemetery opened in Brooklyn. In stark contrast to the crowded churchyard cemeteries, it demonstrated that burial grounds could instead be beautiful landscaped parks on their own. This reflected an emerging view across Europe and the US of how cemeteries should be built. There was a growing belief, especially in crowded cities, that illnesses were caused by foul air, or miasmas, and that cemeteries were a contributing factor. With its immediate popularity, Greenwood Cemetery became the model for the rural cemetery movement, which led to New York City's 1847 Rural Cemetery Act. This act stopped the creation of new cemeteries in Manhattan, and since Brooklyn was already largely developed, Queens became the hub for this new type of cemetery. A lot of them. All of the gray blocks on this map are cemeteries. Cemeteries take up roughly 5,000 acres in Queens, roughly 7% of the entire borough. If that doesn't seem impressive, think about it like this. Queens is half the size of Chicago, yet has 3 times the amount of land dedicated to cemeteries. If you look at a topographical map of the area, you can see that they're all along the high ground of the terminal moraine, which makes sense if you want to keep your burials dry. The last piece of pre-consolidation development that I'll mention is Long Island City. This was a major exception to all the towns and villages that made up the rest of the borough. Thanks to its proximity to Manhattan, the ferry ports and factories in this area stayed very busy. The development here led to the consolidation of smaller towns in the area that created Long Island City in 1870. And this would be the single city that was subsumed by Queens during the greater consolidation in 1898.
Once you got past Astoria, Long Island City, you were in no man's land, literally. So there was room to build.
I'm at the beautiful Flushing Meadows Park, and I want to just take a quick second to thank the sponsor of today's video, Ground News. Ground News is a tool I use to be a more responsible consumer of the news. It helps me understand the bias, factuality, and ownership of different sources of news media. So go to the link at the top of my description or ground.news/Daniel Steiner, or you can scan this QR code right here to get 40% off their Vantage plan, which is the plan that I use to get access to all of their features. Ground News gathers news articles from over 50,000 sources around the world and provides tools to help you understand the factuality, bias, and ownership of each of them. There are a lot of different biases in the news. Some of them come from different headlines, which you can see side by side on Ground News, which is why the blind spot tool is one of my favorite tools of Ground News, where I can see what is not being reported on either side of the spectrum. So here's an example of how this works. On this article about a battle to win a New York City casino license, I can quickly see the different slant in the headlines on the left, in the center, and on the right. On the right-hand side, I can see the bias distribution, which shows me that this is mostly being reported by the left, so it's probably a blind spot for the right. I can see how factual it is, and I can see the ownership of these sources. I'm a huge fan of Ground News and what they're doing, and if you use the link in the description, that will really help me as well. So thank you to Ground News for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the map of Queens. And I'm going to keep enjoying this park.
So when we became part of the 5 boroughs, 1898, there was a lot of excitement. People weren't really sure what was going to happen, but with it came the promise of infrastructure, a new suburb, that all of the open land and unruly territory, the topography, would be tamed and converted into communities.
In 1909, the Queensboro Bridge was completed over the narrow strip of land that is Roosevelt Island and into Long Island City. It was the first bridge to connect the two boroughs by road and trolley. And only 8 years later, Hell's Gate was built north of it for just trains. In the Brooklyn video, I talked about the immediate impact of the Brooklyn Bridge and the explosive growth that happened, and that wasn't the case with Queens and the Queensboro Bridge. Part of the reason for this is because the city was really bogged down by corruption at the time. In 1932, almost 25 years after the Queensboro Bridge had opened, there still weren't traffic lines painted on it. In 1911, the president of Queensboro directed the Topographical Bureau to come and create a way to connect all of the street systems.
When the city engineers from the Queens Topographical Bureau came out here, they were very surprised to see that a lot of the homesteads were still occupied, and the people there, as far as 1930 standard of living in New York City is concerned, were living in the medieval state. No electricity, no telephone, outside toilet, outside well, outside kitchens, everything. So they were living about 100 years behind the times.
The area was formerly about 60 villages, each with their own street names and house numbers. In order to create a unified street naming system, the Topographical Bureau came up with a complex superimposed grid, a rational system imposed on an irrational landscape. It makes sense that you wouldn't want like 40 main streets and like 100 Washington streets, but the way they did it led to Queens having a street, avenue, place, lane, and drive for nearly every number. That means in Queens, you can find 69th Street, 69th Place, 69th Lane, 69th Road, 69th Drive, and 69th Avenue. The main goal was that avenues would count up as they moved east, and streets would count up as they moved south. This worked generally well, except in the Rockaways, where the street count was reversed. So they added a beach as the suffix for all of those, just to make it nice and easy for us.
When developers came out here, they're like, so this is like in the hands of just a few families, and they're looking to sell? Yeah, let's do it. So it was like, whatever you want. You want to build an airstrip? Fine. You want to build the planned communities? Fine. You want to it was just like whatever. It was just like everybody for himself, and it was that for a while.
This land rush within the nation's largest city coincided with the emergence of modern urban planning ideas, making it the perfect testing ground for new approaches to development. In 1900, cities were bigger than ever and covered in a new industrial soot.
Everybody has those visions of the Lower East Side, all those people crammed, stacked upon each other, right?
In a particularly filthy London in 1898, Ebenezer Howard published a book outlining his vision of what cities could be: walkable, green, self-contained, and human-scaled. This was the birth of the Garden City movement. Within a decade, the movement made the leap across the Atlantic, and in 1909, Forest Hills Garden was the first garden city in America. Designed by Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., who was inspired by his father's work on Central Park, Forest Hills was created to demonstrate that quality living could be affordable. Ironically, this area is now incredibly expensive.
It's beautiful. It's really nice. Do not park on the side streets, though. You will be booted in 60 seconds.
Forest Hills was shortly followed by Sunnyside Gardens and Jackson Heights. Each followed Garden City principles to varying degrees and explored what future development of the U.S. could look like. Both of these communities were intentionally placed next to the Long Island Railroad or the subway. And the train station at Forest Hills is freaking beautiful. The idea is that they were self-contained, but still connected to the city. But the reality was that they were now a part of New York City. And through the lens of Robert Moses, the open and undeveloped land within the borough and on the rest of Long Island was there to serve a different purpose. Robert Moses's reign in New York City aligned with the period of time that Queens was ready to be developed. No other borough got more of his highways than Queens did. Nearly half of all of the mileage he built was here. He had a different vision than the Garden City planners. He saw highways and airports and a park grand enough to carry his own name. In the center of Queens is its largest park, Flushing Meadows Corona Park.
This is the site of the 3940 and also the 1964-65 World's Fairs. It's very unusual that a city in the United States gets one World's Fair, and we had two.
While each World's Fair showcased what the future could be, Robert Moses used them under the guise of a temporary exhibition to create the permanent infrastructure that he wanted.
World's Fairs, as a rule, are ephemeral. Will there be anything lasting at this one?
Oh, yes, indeed. We're going to finish Flushing Meadow Park with the receipts of the fair. And when I say that, I think it'll be the finest park in the city of New York. It's right at the geographical and population center, and I think it will cost about $10 million to finish the park.
Flushing Meadows was originally a wetland, so you couldn't farm on it and you couldn't build on it. And in 1900, if you couldn't do either of those things, it wasn't viewed as having any inherent value. So it became home to the Corona ash dump. With mounds of ash and burning garbage reaching 100 feet high, this desolate landscape was the inspiration for the Valley of Ashes in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. In the ashes, Moses imagined a park big enough and beautiful enough to carry his own name, Robert Moses Park. The cleanup, hydrology, and construction of this park was a huge undertaking that took the bloated funding of 2 different World's Fairs and 40 years to get there. But at the 1964 World's Fair, there was one exhibit that Moses was interested in, because he helped build it. And you can actually still go see it. I wore my sunglasses in here in their prescription. So we'll see how much of this I can see. This museum has a really cool panorama of all of New York City that I'm looking at. Whoa, check this out. This is Staten Island. This is so cool. There's Brooklyn, Manhattan's over there. Queens over there. I'm over the Bronx right now. Check this out. This panorama takes up nearly 10,000 square feet and was Moses's way of showing his vision for and accomplishments in this city. The 1964 World's Fair is a clear demonstration of Moses's attitude toward cars. He provided massive parking lots and refused to extend the 7 train into the park. And he also liked the byproduct that those who couldn't afford them wouldn't be able to go to the parks and beaches that he built. There is one particularly frustrating story about when the Long Island Expressway was being built. When given the option to just future-proof it for mass transit, he strongly opposed it. It would have taken just a fraction of the cost to reinforce the roadway and widen it by about 40 feet to allow for future bus lanes or a train in the middle, but instead he rushed construction so that it could not happen. This one decision, through its future monetary cost to fix it and the traffic congestion caused through that construction, crippled Queens' connection to Manhattan for decades. But of course, it wasn't just freeways and parks. Moses seemed to have his fingers in every little pot. All of the open space in Queens lent itself to the building of two airports within the city, LaGuardia and JFK. Originally called North Beach Airport, LaGuardia was the first of the two.
Prior to that was an amusement park. It was one of the largest amusement parks in North America. It was the direct competitor to Coney Island, and it was created by William Steinway, the piano manufacturer, along with George Ehret, who was the beer king of New York.
But today, JFK is much bigger. It's huge. The airports and cemeteries alone take up more than 15% of the land area in Queens. That's crazy to me. Moses played a large role in developing both of these airports, and he even had big plans to essentially cover all of Jamaica Bay in concrete. But because of his waning power, that never happened. In 1961, Jane Jacobs published The Death and Life of Great American Cities. It took direct aim at Moses's urban planning philosophy and did irreparable damage to his reputation. This, in part, is why he never got Robert Moses Park.
But from 1920 up until 1963-64, so like a 40-year period, that was when the major conversion happened. But over such a wide area. It wasn't just a small little pocket, it was everywhere. I don't even know how people slept. The construction was like 24/7.
"34% of the land in New York City is one of the 5 boroughs. Even though Queens is the largest by far, it's less populated than Brooklyn, the second largest. This is largely because Robert Moses was able to cement his vision of the city into Queens more than anywhere else. So while Robert Moses wasn't directly involved with the development of Levittown, it was his infrastructure, his vision of the city that enabled it. Obviously, Queens is huge, and there's no chance I could cover all of it in just this one video. So if you have other video ideas for Queens or all of New York or really anywhere in the world, please let me know. There's a form in the description you can fill out if you have those ideas, or if there's anyone you think I should talk to. In the description, I've also put links to Jason's books and to the Bound House and some of their resources, so go check those out. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Give this video a like, and thank you to the Patreons for supporting this channel. If you want to do this, that's an option, also in the description. Thank you for watching. Bye. See you in another video soon.